continue. Jurian,
Yeah,
I can share the screen myself, right?
sure, you can.
Okay. Let me see. That's not. I have to do it over here. I think share screen. Oh yeah, there it is. Share. Do you see some PowerPoint with some dudes on the podium?
Yeah, but he's very ugly.
Yeah, that's the one. That's the one. Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah, that's me. Okay, I will continue. As you see in the picture, normally I'm not using PowerPoints, but for this time I made one. My name is Rini, and I'm a scientist. um, which means I like to observe, I like to analyze, I like to see what's there, and I see things once and I find it interesting. If you see it twice, you say, hey, I've seen this before. And the third time, I think, hey, this is a new theory or something. So I tend to write about it, do some research about it. And a couple of years ago, I discovered the business novel. Because I think you always should approach people in their own language, which I find it easy to read. And I discovered a business novel, which is for me a very powerful means to express a new idea. It started with my first book on this format, The Power of Scrum, and has been continued. In a way, I'm also like to read them. The most recent one, thanks to Jurian on his advice, is this one that I bought and read, The Motive. I'm a big fan of Patrick Lencioni's and his way of setting up a business novel, which is two-thirds, three-quarter of the book is a business novel, lightweight, easy to read, and then in the end he gives a summary in a kind of a model where he says, well, in fact, the thing I tried to convey looks like this. For the Formula X book, we did something the same. Maybe it's a little bit the story behind it is that the publisher came to me with the question if I liked Formula One. I said, well, I like to watch it in on the Sundays. Sometimes I fall asleep because it's I have a nice nap, but that's about it. I like it, but I'm not a big fan. But they said, well, we see a market over there. And I said, well, I'm thinking about a book about speed. And then, well, I met Jurian. We knew each other. I didn't know about his big hobby and a fanship of Formula One. We teamed up, and the rest is history. But let's say we did think about what's the message? What do we try to convey in the book? And we came up with a simple model, um, which is we called it the faster model. And I will spend the next 15, maybe 20 minutes on going through that. I will do it in two parts. First, the first three of the faster model, and then the last three of the faster model with some poll in the middle. So let me see if this works. Next slide. Yes. So speed. What was it all about? Um, Newton told us that in fact speed is constant, and that's something we tend to forget. If you don't do anything, an object that has a certain speed continues with that speed, or when it's standing still, if you do nothing, it keeps standing still. So in high school, we are being taught this formula. The v at times t is the v at time 0 plus a times t, where a is the acceleration. So the question is, if you're in an organization where you like to accelerate, where the things need to be faster because your business moving up because of digitization or whatever reason it is, the question is, what do you actually do? And we see many organizations discuss speed, and this says we have to do it faster, and our company wants to become faster, or our customers want us to increase the speed of delivering stuff like this. The question I always ask back in return comes from this formula. What's your A? What's your acceleration? What are you doing in your organization to actually accelerate? Because if you don't accelerate that we see from this formula, it doesn't get faster. So that's what we do in the model. We explore 6 dimensions for the A, the 6 dimensions for the acceleration. So this is a summarizing slide. Let's have the first one, for the fast one, which is focus and clarity. Um, which I think is interesting, especially nowadays when we work with teams that are more self-managing or self-steering. Is the question is, what's their true north? What's their compass? Um, in many Dutch organizations are often invited to come by. They made this transformation. They're working with agile teams, and when I meet the teams or I meet somebody of the teams, I always ask the same question. And the question is, when are you successful? What's your definition of success? And it may not be surprising to you, or maybe it is, that let's say my experience is that over 50%, so roughly 60 to 70% of the teams are not able to clarify what their definition of success is. Yeah, well, it's the amount of work they pull from a backlog and get to done in 2 weeks of time. Well, that doesn't really make me get up in the morning. So the question is, when are you successful? And I think it's in the rights of human beings to become successful, but then you also need to know what success is. And the question is, what's this? The basic question you ask yourself all the time. From Formula One, we've known, I've learned, and working with Jurian, is the ultimate question all the time for improvements is, does it make the car faster? For any investment we have to do, we can spend millions of dollars, tens thousands of hours. The question is always, does it make the car faster? And not the question is, do you think it makes the car? No, does it make the car faster? So for everything, you need to have data. You have to experiment. You have to analyze. You have to make sure, does it make the car faster? And the question is, what's this question for your team, for your department, for your organization? What's this one unique question that you ask yourself all the time? What's your car? What's your faster? So it could be things like, how will this increase the NPS, or how many casualties will we decrease, or how many patients will we cure earlier? Whatever it is, what is your true north? What's your definition of success? And what is the single questions you ask each other and your people and your boss all the time about new ideas? And my experience is, in most organizations, there isn't any. Well, if that's not clear what success is, how can you expect people to really be successful? So that's the first one: focus and clarity. We move to this second one. Oh yeah, this is also maybe interesting for the second one. Yeah, I said I hardly work with slides. One thing I often reuse from Steve Denning is what he calls the Copernican revolution in management, which is talking about, do you go for the left side where you say, well, my firm is the center of the universe and there's a couple of customers circling around me? Or do I really see the customer as the center of his or my universe, where my firm is circling around it? And we can learn from Copernicus, from the revolution. Let's say this, the latter view is most successful. And that's why this changes to speed and also the changes to customer centricity or to flexible or responsive organizations is so hard, because in most cases it's not about changing ways of working. It's not about using a new method. No, it's a whole new way of mindset and looking at things, where you let's really take let go of the past, where you thought the company is at the core of what we do, and you really start to look at the customer at the core of what you do. Second thing, accelerate decisions. That's something I really learned from working with Jurian, and also learned from Formula One. And if this is one of the things that when you see it, you can't get rid of it. The strange thing in organizations, if we talk about decisions, if we talk about changing things, we act as if they're irreversible. Or we think that if we change something in an organization, or in a way of working, or in a method, or in a KPI, we pretend whether that decision is irreversible. So we discuss about it, we take time, we have all these kinds of meetings, everybody has to say something about it. The thing is, it makes sense for irreversible decisions. However, most of them aren't. Most decisions in companies are reversible. So you don't have to take the decision forever. In many cases, you never take a decision forever. Even about companies where they're organized, you're just taking decision until the next reorganization, or you're using a new business model until the next one pops along. And this tends to get faster and faster anyway. So once you start to see that most decisions are reversible, there is no reason not to experiment. There's no reason to say, well, we don't really know. Let's try it out and see what the data looks. So the acceleration of decision making, which makes you faster, of course, is in many cases in organizations that we work in, is treating decisions not as irreversible, but treating most decisions as what they are: reversible decisions. Where, of course, it makes sense to say, well, it's the boundary, what's the risk we want to take, how big can the experiment will be, but still they are reversible decisions. And when you let them go and you let them loose and you trust people to act wisely with them, you will see that the learning will happen much more faster. And I think, the learning is in many cases more valuable than the decision itself. So accelerate decision is the number two. One of the techniques that can help with that, and I put it here, and I will also put it in the handout, is what comes from Management 3.0 is the delegation poker. Because there are several kinds of decisions, some of them at several levels. And the thing is, you have to make this decision with your teams or within your department or with your boss or with your customer. What are the decisions you're autonomous taken? What are the ones you consult each other? What is the one where you completely delegate? And I found in practice that this delegation poker, or at least the 7 levels of delegation, are a great way to deal with decision making. It's not black and white. It's not the boss decides or the team decides or the customer. There are several shades of gray, and the delegation poker helps with this. And then it also helps you to make decisions faster because in most cases they're reversible. Anyway, the third one, simplify. Um, I think we could work a whole seminar about this. It's about simplification. Like Leonardo da Vinci said, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. Um, I think the biggest challenge that we see in large organizations is that we've overcomplified things, that we made it more complex, and making something simple complex is much easier than making something complex simple again. And that's why you see, especially in larger organizations or in established companies, they they are really have problems with the new kid on the block. With the small startup company that only has a single app or a single service or whatever it is, because these guys, they don't have customers, they don't have products, they don't have money, so they have to really be simple and powerful to be successful. So if you really want to become faster, simplification is the one thing to do, but it's many cases hard because you don't see it yourself. Which was the third thing. I have no idea how I'm doing with the timing. That's not too bad. Um, One of the things you could help, of course, is, and I'll also put in the handout, is Gary Hamel's bureaucracy mass index. There's the 7 types of bureaucracy you can find in organizations that really make you slow, and you can use them to take away to make things simpler. I think this is the time to throw in the polls, Jurjan. Can you assist with
Sure.
that? Because you
Of
were so
course. If you could stop sharing your screen,
okay,
I'll
okay, okay.
drop
Yeah,
in the poll.
yeah.
So it's time for people to wake up again. You had a couple of questions prepared. 3. Would you like to go over them or just drop them
Yeah,
in and
just
see what people do?
throw them in.
Okay,
I'm really curious.
there you go.
Oh, they're all three. Yeah, okay. So the first question I wanted to ask is about personal success. So the question is, if you have to look to yourself, what are you being measured on? What are you judged on? What's the decision of people look at your success? So is it your presence at work, or is it the process execution, or is it the predictability in the work you do? Is it the output that you deliver, or is it the impact that you give? What, and of course, all 5 matter, but at the end of the day, if you look at, what is, how am I being evaluated as an individual? How is my success being determined? What one is that? Second question is about the predictability in your work. So how unpredictable is the work that you're doing? Is it very predictable, or is it really totally unpredictable and you don't know exactly what's happened? And the third one is similar, but it's how far can you plan ahead? So to which extent, how far can you reliably plan ahead in your work in your organization? But maybe I can tell a small anecdote in the middle. For the people that read the book, we've taken an analogy of a kitchen builder. So we thought about, we have to find an environment that everybody can relate to. So we thought about a factory that produces kitchens, and of course it's obvious it's a fake story, and the guy in charge starts to make mistakes, but the thing is that since we've wrote the book, I actually have been approached now 3 times by people wanting to know the address or want to check whether this kitchen factory is actually really alive. One of them being really concrete, that they said, I really need a kitchen within 2 weeks. Could you give me the address of the kitchen factory? So
And then
that's
the
why
first thing to do is buy the book
yeah,
and hope to
that's
find
why
the answer.
in the third print from now on, in the front matter, we have put the sign that everything is fictitious. It doesn't really relate to any existing companies or people
Or we can
or
sell an ad, some ad space there.
yeah, maybe.
All right, so 77% voted. I
Yeah, so
think we
give
should just end the poll and
10 seconds. Oh, you
Oh,
ended
sorry, I'm
already?
too fast.
Okay, well, we'll
Let me
deal with
just
it.
share the results with you.
So let me take a look at it. The first one, yeah, the first one, I think I've asked this poll question before, and I think this is really, really interesting because what I see in many cases that the majority of the people actually is this is what they answer. So they say, well, in the end of the day, I'm really judged on impact. I'm not sure how it is with you, Jurian, but the companies that I visit, it's rarely the case.
Well, obviously people value impact, but if you look at what will happen if they don't make the hours, there's another thing present in the system that will pull them into being present for the whole day.
But my experience is, let's say, in most organizations I visit, also the ones that have changed, that in the end, people are still being judged, in my case, most of the time at predictability and output.
Hmm.
And yes, there's the story about impact, but
I
I find
think
this
I think
curious.
so. Part of my reflection on that is that very often people don't really necessarily know what is the impact that the organization is looking for, right? So if you're in a team somewhere far away from the board, you don't really have a lot of awareness of what the strategy is or what are the highest priorities, what are the must-win battles, so to say, and you just go to your work and do the task that's in front of you. So I guess that's the sad part of it. But yeah, I mean, people are optimistic, which is also nice.
Let's maybe it's also one thing for after the presentation to really discuss with the group. How unpredictable is the work in your organization? 50-50, roughly. Totally not good, and totally yes, I wouldn't expect here. So this is pretty obvious. And you see indeed, let's say the amount of organizations that are able to plan 1 year or half a year ahead, the majority is over there. That's something I would really would expect. I think the impact is interesting because I think it should be fair. It should be the way it is. The contradiction in the thing is that when I ask the questions to people, most of them I get the answer. The majority says impact, but if I look at the systems that they use in their organizations, it's rarely impact. But let's maybe this is a discussion point. Poll is open. Maybe there's some things to formulakitchen.com. Yeah, who knows?
I actually own that domain, if I'm correct, or at least one part of, or the
Okay.
Dutch edition. I'm not sure.
Uh,
So when is your new book coming? Wouter asks. Well, you have another book already out there, which you co-authored.
Yes,
I'm
yes,
still
yeah,
too busy to write
we.
another one.
So just recently, I think, how long is it? 2 months ago, or something, or a month ago, we released a book on agile transformations. Which is not scientific at all. We just looked at with a couple of colleagues, after doing more than 100 transformations in an organization. Hey, what's emerging over there? How can you change predictably the unpredictable, or how can you plan something like a transformation? And it's full of anecdotes and stuff like this. At the moment, with some colleagues, are writing a book on agile work formats. But the book which is on my mind, which I'm dreaming about and I'm sleeping about and not writing, I'm writing it in my head, is really about speed on an organizational level, like
Mm.
the book on agile, but then also one on speed, and looking at
Mm.
the factors that you actually can implement directly to increase the speed. Our book on Formula X is also going that way, but it's also more on a conceptual level with the 6 dimensions, but really going one level beyond with concrete cases of measures they've taken to really increase the speed.
So
That's
Rini,
that's but yeah.
Rini, what do you think about the third one? The third answer in the poll is pretty interesting to me.
Yeah, the stupid thing about the question that I've composed is, I think the trend is more is interesting. I've lost the poll. Where is it? Over here. Is what do you think it will be in 6 months from now, or how is this going to change in the next years? And
Mm.
my experience, it's getting shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. And that's interesting because we tend to be in organizations, you also see the question two, where it's 50-50 predictable. The biggest challenge for us in the coming decades is that we'll be in a world where, let's say, predictability is going down, and under the unpredictable is starting to influence our day-to-day business. But most organizations, especially the larger ones, or the ones that are around for a couple of times, are completely built on predictability. And it's not in just the methods or in the processes. It's throughout. It's in everything they do. If you're predictable, you're good. If it's unpredictable, you're not. The answer, I don't know, is not being appreciated. So if you want, and I think the biggest challenge for us for the coming decades, and also a lot of work for us for the coming decades, is really to build organizations that are built around unpredictability and are able to deal with that. And a personal challenge, I think, or a personal, how you call it, um, how you call it, for the next years, is not only on the organizational level, but also on an individual level. I think we need to completely redesign or reinvent educational systems
Mm.
in which we teach kids and students to make mistakes. Well, we teach them that it's not the perfect guy who gets an A who makes a great career. It's the one who tries, falls on his nose and tries again, is the one, who will be successful. And that's
Mm.
why even in today's world, you see many entrepreneurs or people that run large companies being dropouts from school. Why? Well, they've learned it's not about learning stuff in the head and being a perfectionist. It's about learning by doing. So I think the next generations will need to prepare for that.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
that's my personal quest. I was looking for the word quest for the coming years. But let's say the unpredictable in organizations that expect predictability. I think that's something we will be working on for a couple of years. Let's
Yeah, and
move back
hopefully,
to the faster model.
yeah, and hopefully, like what Isabel is pointing out, the pandemic is obviously a good example. Like, how is your yearly budget going right now? Right? Are you still sticking to the plan that you made 4 months ago, or are you really throwing it out of the window and being quick on your feet?
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. And the pandemic is also interesting for two sides. One of the things I find it really interesting that we've done these agile transformations. We're trying to make companies more responsive and more agile and stuff like this. And now is the lakmus proof. I'm not sure what is the English word.
The
This
proof of
is
the pudding.
this is the proof of the pudding. I mean, what's happening now, and are you responsive in a way, and how do you respond, and do you respond because of an opportunity or because things change, and do you approach with a positive behavior, or is this just, are you being afraid and are you going to fall back on old habits? And I think that's a big challenge, but I think it's part of our, I've done a webinar last week with a organizational psychologist, Anja Marijke, and she said, what you can see in these phases, especially in the early weeks of the pandemic, is really lizard brain behavior.
Mm.
It's fight, freeze, or run.
Yep.
And you see exactly these three core responses in many organizations. They either ignore the thing that's happening and just wait it to pass by, or they're using the old trick of cutting cost, or the third one saying, well, there's a big opportunity here. How can we
Mm-hmm.
contribute, and what's the new chances? Let's move back to the presentation.
Yep.
4, faster model, team engagement. Um, One thing, you really appreciate, and maybe this is also a side story, is that in the novelish, in the business novel part of Formula X, we there's this head person who is stuck, and he gets his inspiration by visiting F1 as a VIP guest. So we wrote a book, we wrote a manuscript. Yuri and I looked at each other and said, well, have you ever been as a VIP guest to the Formula One? Well, no, I didn't. No, I wasn't. So maybe what the story wrote is completely bollocks. So let's see if we can test this. So we dug up a lot of money, and we thought it was enough, but we needed to add some little more. So the two of us went as a VIP. We had to buy the VIP tickets, and we went to the Barcelona race last year. Made some videos over there. But one thing that I really, and I think for this was the point of time where it really F1 hit my heart, is you saw and actually you felt and you sensed the team spirit everywhere. It was amazing. It was in the celebrations after the race. In our case, Max qualified fourth, and then he made it to the podium. He actually got to third place. But also we were able to do these pit walks where we visited the teams, and I think it's you sense the teamness and the ownership everywhere, and that was the point in time where I really F1, really, I fell in love a little bit, and it hit me deep. And one of the things, if you talk about team engagement, what I really like is two things on the content side. One of them I will go through a little bit quickly, which is this model by a colleague of mine, Peter Koning. He makes, let's say, he helps team develop in their ownership. I will put in some background material in the handout. Oh, and the other thing, oh no, maybe let's discuss it now, because I wanted to do something else. But one of the things I've noticed is that we treat teams as they are all the same. Or if we want to make them self-managing, we just expect them to be self-managing from one day to the other, or in a split second. And what Peter Koning taught me is that, let's say, if the maturity of the team and the freedom they get is not imbalanced, you get ineffective or even destructive behavior. And the thing is, which for me interesting, is that when you have a low mature team and they have too much freedom, what you actually see, what's on the surface of that team, is completely identical to a team which is very mature and which does not get enough freedom. It's nothing gets out of it. People get stressed. There's retention. There is objection. There's loss of energy, and you see all the bad things happening. And the core response of most leaders, if teams are not functioning well, they think, well, apparently they have too much freedom. And I think one of the things that I use, that's why I use it with leadership teams as well, is that if you observe ineffective teams, ask yourself whether it's too much freedom, or may it be that these guys are just too professional, have good enough experience, that there's just not enough freedom. They cannot be successful. And if you cannot be successful because there's not enough autonomy, well, why try? So I think, that's one of the things that helped me. The fifth element of the faster model is elementary physics. I started off with the core formula of speed. Let me see. Yeah. One of the things which is really interesting is this model. I tend to write on flip charts, so I made one flip in this presentation. Is the second law of Newton, which is F is m times a. So it's force is mass times acceleration. If you rewrite the formula, it says acceleration is force divided by mass. And I think this is really interesting. And why? Well, maybe to clarify the formula again, if you look lower, what I try to draw over there is a grocery cart. So you go to the supermarket and you put your groceries in the cart. Well, and we all know, if you want to have the cart accelerate, which is the A in the picture, you have to push the handlebar with a certain force. And we also know, that the more mass the cart has, the harder you have to push. So in fact, that's second law of Newton's. Huh? So I always thought about why Newton took so long. My theory is that there were no supermarkets in its time of day. In 1687, those supermarkets, so it took a little bit longer. But if you go back to the formula, acceleration is force divided by mass, you can see what we've been doing in the past decades in organization. If we wanted to go faster, we added force. Bigger machines, more people, bigger computer power, a larger engine. Whatever we try to do, if we wanted to accelerate, we try to increase the force. But as you can see from the formula, there is another way to increase the acceleration, and it's keeping force constant, but also lowering mass. And I think that the challenges or the opportunities for organizations in the coming decades lies exactly there. Decreasing mass, more digitization, which doesn't have mass, smaller teams has lower mass, a smaller focus, simplicity, because there's lower mass. So if you're able to shrink on the mass level, you can keep the force the same and still accelerate. That's, I think, the thing about Newton's law. And the second thing, of course, there's another law in physics that you can reuse. That's that's from Einstein, and I always try to clarify this with a story. Suppose you're walking through in India, in the eastern part of the northeastern part of India. You're walking through the forest, and you run into a tiger. Well, if you walk into a tiger, you have a big problem, because the tiger is hungry and he really likes you. He thinks, well, this is a nice bite. And then the question is always, how fast should you run to survive? And most people, they think, well, you need to climb a tree or something. It's not correct because, tigers can climb. Some think you have to be faster than the tiger. Well, that's also not possible because tigers are pretty fast. No, the real answer to the question is you have to just run a little bit faster than the person next to you. Speed is relative. And that's also, you don't need to be the fastest one in the whole world. You just need to be a little bit faster than your competitor. And sometimes that can be a little bit faster than your customer, or it can be a little bit faster than the other colleague, or a little bit faster than the other team. So speed is relative. And like in Formula One, it's not that you have the ultimate speed. You just have to be a millisecond faster than the other team in order to win. Finally, let's go to 6, rhythmic learning. And that's one of the things which really struck me in and Jurian also clarified this a little bit. The debrief of the race lasts longer than the race itself. During the weekend, there is tens of learning points and a learning rhythm in there. I think what we could take over from Formula One is this cadence in learning, and really the rhythm in learning. In fact, putting the learning more important than the actual result. And I think that's something that struck me when doing this research and working with Jurian on the book, is that I always thought that a Formula One team or a Formula One driver wanted to win the race. And of course they want to win the race, but they just want to make the fastest lap. And they don't want to make the fastest lap because they want to make this, because they know that when we try to make the fastest lap now, we will get the data and get the learning to make it even faster in the next round. And it's even for each curve, each turn in the circuit. They try to run it on the edge to know, because on that edge lies the knowledge and lies the data to learn how to make the turn a little bit faster the next time. And why do I find this so inspiring? Well, I find this so inspiring because the companies I visit, the teams I work with, the board of directors I'm asked to challenge them, is how often do you really race on the edge? To which extent are you actually trying to find that edge, because that's where the knowledge lies, to really push the border and really to gain the knowledge to go even faster? Or are you trying to be safe? But if you try to be safe, there's actually not going to be the learning to go faster. And I think this is a really interesting thing to say. Well, we just try to win races, and winning the race is a by effect, is a side effect from trying to be the fastest and the best learners. And I think we can take this, and I think we also can bring this to the teams we work with, the agile teams. They're saying, well, we want to learn how the next sprint can be better. And the best way to learn how to make the next sprint better is actually delivering a piece of product that's valuable to our customers. One of the final things in the slides is the research. One of the research, it was the Aristotle project, and most people present probably have heard about it. If you haven't, it's really interesting material. What they did, they went into Google and they looked at a bunch of teams and trying to find out which factors make a team hyper productive. And all the hypotheses they got, they could throw out of the window. And what in the end remained is that there's 5 factors, but the first one is very, very, very dominant, and that's psychological safety. If people are not feeling safe, they won't take risks. And I think that's also what we've sensed when we were at the racetrack, Jurjan. When we visited the teams, so we saw the engineers work, nobody was afraid. They were taking the risk, and they will know that if they make a mistake, they won't be blamed for it, but it will be treated as a learning opportunity, because everybody's trying their best to go faster. And I think, if we want to prepare organization for the next decades, where we want to need to make them faster because our society is speeding up, I think the number one thing to focus on is psychological safety, making people feel safe. And again, in organizations that expect predictability, psychological safety tends to be low. So this is the area where the most interesting challenges and opportunities lie for us. So wrapping up, speed doesn't change by itself. Hey, you need to accelerate. That's why we have the faster model. In fact, the 6 dimensions, maybe you've noticed, also sum up to the word faster. Focus and clarity, accelerate decisions, simplify, team engagement, elementary physics, and rhythmic learning. But to close off, I'm from Delft University, and if you go to Delft, people always gave these Delft blue tiles, and they have a saying on it. So I would to end up with a saying like this: And I stole it from Mario Andretti, one of the famous Formula One drivers. Says, if everything seems under control in your organization, you're just not going fast enough. Thank you.